Whenever Hungary is mentioned somewhere in the world, to be sure the Hortobágy is also referred to. Its valuable landscape, rich flora and fauna, special ethnographic and cultural historic relics make this region an irreplaceable wealth and a national treasure. The origin of the grey cattle is still unclear, but we can be sure that its present form was created in the Carpathian Basin. Scientists agree that the wild ancestor of these species were the aurochs, Bos primigenius. At the end of the 18th century, the army and agriculture desperately needed quality horses, which the small breeders were unable to produce. The Emperor Joseph II decided to establish a stud farm and collected 550 mares, Transylvanian, German and Hungarian horses in mezzo hedges. The ancestor of the Hungarian racka sheep was probably the wild sheep of Middle Asia, which came into the Carpathian Basin with the conquering Hungarians in the 9th century. Writings say that the shepherd preserved the nomadic lifestyle for the longest time. Two main groups of shepherd buildings can be distinguished on the Hortobágy. One concerns the buildings for the stock, and the other group refers to those for the shepherd. The horse shows revive the traditions of the horse herds of old times and include the famous 5-in-hand driving. At the end of the 19th century, these stable, mud or cob-walled herdsmen's huts with thatched or tiled roofs appeared on the Putzer. The more spacious farmsteads are decorated with a porch. The water buffalo originates from the Indian wild buffalo or from the Arni buffalo, which live in great numbers in the swamps of East India even today. Its characteristic colour is ash grey, almost black. This pig was bred from the Serbian and Hungarian type. This swine is typically bred for its lard and not for its meat, which is very plain. The Shepards Museum is situated along the road going through Hortobágy village, next to the Nagyszárda and the Nine-Arch Bridge. Its historic building used to be a cart shed from the 19th century. The decorated objects were mostly made of leather, wood and horn. Drinking horns, salt keepers and sheaths for keeping the mange ointment in were made from the latter. The geometric figures and plants scratched with the point of a knife are reminiscent of the decorations on plates from the conquest. This exhibition shows the various herdsmen doing their typical work, surrounded by their special tools. Rustic buildings made of reed, which illustrate the herdsmen's lives and living conditions, can be seen in the hall. The exhibition includes a collection of selected handmade items, such as the embroidered felt cloaks, horn and wood carvings, leatherwork by the shepherds, cattle and sheep bells, and traditional musical instruments, which are all characteristic of the Hortobágy region. The herdsmen of the Hortobágy formed a distinct part of the traditionalist community, which the ethnographic literature calls the herdsman's order. In the Hortobágy, the herdsmen were the carriers and vivification of a particular culture, which was more archaic than that of the peasants. 2 national parks have been established to preserve the uniquely multifaceted natural and cultural values of the Hungarian Puszta. The environmental goal of both the Hortobágy National Park and the Kiskutszun National Park is to protect the values of the terrain, wild waters, flora and fauna, as well as the scenery of the region. The most important conservational values of the fish ponds is constituted by birds in the Hortobágy. There are 380 species of birds observed so far in Hungary, with 325 species accepted for the Hortobágy. There are 266 species recorded in Hortobágy Halast fish ponds, with 68 breeding species. One of the most important types for conservational reasons are heron colonies. The importance of fish ponds for breeding species is similar to that of migratory species. This is facilitated by the draining of fish ponds. Large fish ponds can be fished only if there's a smaller and deeper part of the fish pond, so-called fish beds, where all fish are forced to swim when draining the fish ponds, so they can be caught by the nets. The muddy bottom of fish ponds, full of organic material, is revealed by the time of draining, coinciding with the peak of autumn migration. Lake Titisee was constructed in the floodland area of the Titisee by damming the stretch of the river between Kiskor and Tiszavaldt. It's the second largest stagnant water body of the Carpathian Basin, with an area of 127 square kilometers. After the damming, it was possible to get the river barrage of Kiskor going. The present form of Lake Titisee is the result of a long process that resulted in the forming of water bodies, differing from each other in characteristics of appearance, hydrology, and hydrobiology. The Hortobágy National Park preserves some of the most unique curiosities and treasures in Central Europe. There are more than 50 species of orchids, 800 protected plant species, and about 3,600 butterfly and moth species to be found in the 300 national and over 1,000 local protected sites. In the bird reserve, there are strictly protected areas which have highly sensitive wildlife. These areas can only be visited with special permission and are strictly reserved for research and checking purposes. The 9-arch bridge is so well placed that the Hortobágy can't be imagined without it. The bridge, finished in 1833, is the longest and the most beautiful stone bridge in Hungary. By the end of the 18th century, these wells had spread all over the Hortobágy. They were large wells whose perimeter could be as large as 4 meters in order to allow a number of buckets to be used at the same time. For the wells with 2, 3 or 4 drawers, the shepherd stood on a plank over the well to draw water for the animals. There were different kinds of shepherd buildings, some quite primitive, for example the curlew, a cone-shaped hut made of reed, which was used to store the shepherd's lunchbox and fur coat, and as a shelter during long rainfalls. The vasali, the well-known shepherd's kitchen, was also a simple building. It's roofless with felled reed walls to protect the fire from the wind, and is where the shepherds cooked in an iron pot. The landscape of the Hortobágy National Park preserves intact and visible the evidence of its traditional use over more than 2 millennia, and represents the harmonious interaction between human beings and nature. The cultural landscape of the Hortobágy Puszta consists of a vast area of plains and wetlands in eastern Hungary. Traditional forms of land use, such as the grazing of domestic animals, have been present in this pastoral society for more than 2 millennia.